'Tis the season for collabs, I suppose, because I've got another great collaboration for you in today's video with a content creator by the name of Big Poppa Drock. Now, if you are not familiar with Drock, he is an endgame Uber Kraken who specializes in high-end arena. But in addition, during this year's Hell Hades free-to-play challenge, in which 50 content creators rolled up new free-to-play accounts and went head-to-head in competition for 90 days, Big Poppa Drock actually came in third, having never played free-to-play before. So he is a highly knowledgeable and skilled player, and I highly recommend you check out his channel, because even if you are not a spender, I think you'll learn something. He's also a very entertaining guy. I would highly recommend catching a live stream if you can. I will include a link to his channel in the description of this video. Now, we've had two conversations, one on my channel and one on Drock's channel, about topics that I think will be of interest to both spenders and free-to-play players. We really enjoyed talking to each other. These are longer videos. In fact, we talked for several hours off camera as well, because I guess that's what us content creators do, but mostly because he and I really have fun talking Raid. So I hope that comes through in this video. I hope you enjoy it. I am Colred. This is Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. Let's get started. Hey folks, Colred here, and with me is a very special guest, none other than Big Poppa Drock, raid content extraordinaire, voice actor. Dude, you're a star. Thanks for coming on.
That's a very kind thing to say, Colred. I'm a star, man.
You're a star.
I feel special. I feel special being on the channel. Thank you so much for having me, dude. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a while since you have been on the channel. The last time we did a collab was at the end of the Hell Hades free-to-play challenge, where you just represented for all Krakens, man. You showed up, you finished in the top 3 of all the content creators, and yeah, that was quite an eye-opening experience, I think, for everybody.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. Definitely, as someone who'd never done a free-to-play account before, it was very eye-opening for me. And yeah, I think you finished second, and then Cropsio finished first, and I was third. So I had to rep my Kraken brethren. Had to make sure that people knew that us spenders could still, cook up a couple dubs or, some smart strategies every now and then. So it's good to be back, man.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And we're going to be talking some more free-to-play versus spender kind of stuff today in today's video. Specifically, what we want to do is talk about some of those really prominent free-to-play champions that every free-to-play account has. We're going to talk about whether or not they are viable at endgame for Kraken. See if you guys even use the same champions that we use, and if so, maybe how you use them. How do you build them? Use them differently than we do. So that's what we're going to do today. You ready for that?
Yeah, I'm super stoked about it. I think this is a cool idea because, I still have my free-to-play account, but it's still relatively new, right? It's only about 10 months old. So I'm curious to see kind of what you consider free-to-play end game for yourself, and then also whether or not I actually would use them on my main account, where I've spent oodles and boodles of money.
Yeah, it should be another eye-opening collab. So, all right. I am Colred. He is Drock. Let's get started. Okay, so this is the deal. I'm going to name some champions, and then you're going to let me know if they are even on your radar at endgame, and if they are, how they get used, maybe how they're built, where you see them, those kinds of things.
Now, I'm excited to hear who you've picked, because I don't know yet because you haven't told me.
Right. So some of these are going to be, I'm just going to throw some of my favorite champions in there. We're going to talk about a lot of the heavy hitters for free-to-play champions. But let's just go ahead, and we're going to start with the epics. There aren't too many epics on the list that could even, I think, be there. But let's go ahead and start with my favorite arena nuker, which is Genbo.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Genbo the Dishonored, Shadowkin. Do you ever see him, like, even in maybe 3v3 arena, is he ever plus forward and put there? Or is it just too many mythicals living at Kraken land?
Yeah, you will never see Genbo in Kraken Arena unless someone is messing around. Like, that's the thing. Like, sometimes every once in a blue moon, someone will just start throwing epics into a battle. Or if they know the other person, they're communicating that with them maybe on Discord. Like, hey, you want to do an epic only battle? That's about the only time that you'll see him in actual arena content at the end game Kraken level.
That's pretty cool. Have you ever had that? Somebody's like, hey, let's do an all epic battle?
I wish. No, I haven't had a chance to do that yet. And it's one of the things that I wish they would, changed about live arena in general is just have different kind of restrictions and stuff. So I think it'd be a lot of fun. But then the question is, do you have your Genbo built?
Right.
Because there's so many champions I feel like you want to have built for live arena just in case someone pulls something out. So it's tough.
Well, for me, I definitely have my Genbo built. And I don't need him. Like, I could use somebody else, but I just love the champion. I think he's so cool looking. I like the fact that he ignores unkillable. Like, he's for me and where I am in Gold 1 Live Arena and, Gold 5 Classic Arena, like, he does the job, does it well. I don't have to swap people out when I see Leorius the Proud or somebody show up. So it's like, it's nice.
Yeah, he's legit. I've always loved Genbo, so we have this in common.
Okay, cool. So that being said, like, I didn't expect any epics there. And, Genbo, some people would say avoid epic isn't really free to play, which is fair. Are there any epics at all that, like, in your account that you use, maybe even PvE? Anybody show up at all?
Well, so that's a great question. I would tell you that yes, there are epics that show up in PvE for sure. I think most of them show up in things like Cursed City now more than anything else. Like
Yeah.
that mode really requires epic for certain stages. So yeah, so actually you'd be surprised how many times I'm using epics in that kind of capacity. Now, am I using epics in like other areas of content? Not particularly. Um, most of my dungeon teams, if I remember correctly, are all like legendaries or mythicals at this point. So it really, although I will say I'm still actually, I still use a Bat Eater clan boss team. So yeah, I still use epics like
All
Man
right.
Eater.
Yeah.
I've never switched over from that because I didn't want to put my best gear. Like I've had that team for 2.5 years now, and I just click it and it goes and it does what it's supposed to do. So yeah, you'll still see epics on my account, just nowhere near as much as you'd see them on a free to play account for sure.
Right. So, okay. So occasionally an epic shows up. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. I'm assuming Seer still shows up every once in a while for wave clear stuff.
So it's interesting. Like I've gotten away from Seer, and I would say in most content, just because of the massive power creep over the last couple years. Like it's pretty easy on Kraken stuff sometimes now to just blow through Doom Tower. Not having to worry about a Seer. Just set in your team and let your mythicals and your legendaries that have insane stats annihilate stuff. So I
Right.
used to use her more than I do currently, but every once in a while she'll make an appearance depending on certain content. Like I still have a couple of old Ice Golem teams that rely on Seer, and I think my Dragon Hard team, if I remember correctly, does use Seer. I've never bothered to upgrade it because it's like around 20 to 30 seconds, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. I don't need to make it faster.
Do you have Terrace? I know. Do you have him totally like maxed out? Is he God built on your account?
He's definitely pretty strong. I would say the biggest thing that I run into in the Kraken space is I want to try to have a lot of champions geared, and also I mean like this gear is such a massive luck thing, and I
Yeah.
tend to not have the best luck. I don't know what it is, but I mean I used to do gear rolling videos all the time when dungeons made more sense to run, and I just consistently get owned on rolls where I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, how is this, like where are the triple and quad rolls on the gear that I need? So yeah, Taurus is geared pretty strong, but he's still not as fast as I would want him to be, especially with how arena has changed in the last year and a half or so. Live arena specifically.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if in PvE you found that he's a replacement for Seer because of the mechanic of his A3.
So he could be, but I've never taken the time to build those teams specific for PvE stuff. Like I know some people on Hydra use him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've seen him used there. I've certainly seen him used in clan boss teams still. So he absolutely could be, or even in like wave-based content for Doom Tower and stuff like that. But the funny thing about me, Colred, is that for the most part, when I get a team, if it's good enough, I'm happy with it because I'm
Yeah.
so much more focused on PvP. And I think this is the tricky thing because I try to make every build that I put together good for PvP first and foremost, unless the champion is specifically only going to be used in PvE, where it's like, okay, this is only PvE. I'm definitely never taking this champion into PvP. So I'm not as concerned about what that would look like in PvP. But for me, anytime I build a champion, it's the first thing I think is always what is the PvP implication for this build.
Right. Right. Okay. So that's a good lead in there. So I've got a whole list of champions here, and I just wanted to talk about the epics first because we're not going to talk about them again. We're just going to focus on
Yeah, get
legendaries
him
and
out of here.
mythicals. Yeah, get them up out of here. They're done. But I do want to get your impression of the free to play champions that I think a lot of people, especially if they're free to play players, like really focus on, and specifically with PvP. So let's get right to the chase. Cut right to the chase. Go to the original queen of
Mm.
PvP, Arbiter. Let's talk about
Mm.
Arbiter. Is Arbiter a thing in Kraken land, or is she just relegated to the back burner? It's like, no. That was 3 years ago. No more does Arbiter play a role.
Oh, she's definitely a thing. She's had a major resurgence with Pinpoint. In
Okay,
fact,
cool.
I was playing Live Arena earlier today, and I was using her all the time. I think it's, you know why? Because speed has become such an insane thing in the game now. Like, we are living in the absolute, in my opinion, worst speed meta that there's ever been.
Hmm.
And the reality is a lot of reasons why Arbiter makes an appearance now is, first off, she's a Void, and with champions like Odin, Void's got a massive buff in terms of speed potential. And then also, you're more likely to have her +4 than potentially another newer champion like Shuzen.
Right.
Shuzen's been in the game for a year and a half, I think, maybe a little bit longer, but it's still trickier to get some of these champions the further you go into raid because, of course, there are more champions to pull from, and the pool gets larger and larger, and therefore your chances go down. So yeah, Arbiter gets a lot of use now, more than ever before. I wasn't using her for the last year, and in the last couple months, she has absolutely come back into the rotation for me and is someone I use on a daily basis for sure.
So okay, so let's quickly then talk about the fact that if you're building her and you're using her, what does she look like on your account versus my account? So I'm gonna show my Arbiter just here for a second. I got to move your camera. Hang on just a second.
I'll duck out of the way for you. I'll move around.
All right. So this is my Arbiter. I did the same thing that you were talking about. Like, now that Pinpoint's in the game, I put 2 pinpoint pieces on her to get the extra 10%. She's rocking 410 speed. Decent amount of defense here at 3,400. What do you think?
So it's so crazy to me to see the difference between what a free to play endgame build is, versus what I'm working with on my main account. And I have to say, I'm actually really surprised that you're able to get her to 410 speed on a free to play account.
Me too.
Like, that's kind of nuts. How long have you played? Just so I know.
It's been about just under three and a half years.
So that's actually super impressive. I'm really surprised with that. I don't think I expected that level of speed on a free to play. Now, in unfortunately, in my level of arena, 410 is now considered slow, which seems absurd, but that's where we're at. I mean, realistically, the biggest difference is looking at your build. So can you show me total stats? Let's take a look at the total stats for a second. So, okay. So the biggest difference is right off the bat between your build. I'm actually pulling her up just on my side so I can actually compare here. Is first and foremost, mine is way faster.
How fast is your, or do you not want to say?
I don't care. People see it all the time. Mine's like 456 right now. I could make her faster, but I want to have some level of survivability as well. So my Arbiter, for comparison, is rocking 89,000 HP, 89,811.
Okay.
3,697 defense, and still 456 speed. So you can see there's a major difference, and also 400 plus resist, 379 accuracy. Not that necessarily matters that much, but there's a major difference I've seen in the, essentially, when it comes to Kraken builds, in like the ancillary stats and in the survivability. You can build a champion really fast, potentially on a free to play count, clearly, but the difference is they're going to be an absolute, like, just glass, not cannon in this case, but they're going to be glass. They're going to get wrecked the second they get hit. So yeah, way faster, way more durable, way more survivability. That is kind of the theme across my builds, if I were guessing, comparing stuff that you're doing to what I'm doing on my spender account.
So here's a quick question then. Where do you see the differences come in terms of the gear? Is it you're all mythical gear, you've got, extra substat rolls, or is there something that, that you have access to that I'm not putting in here?
So that's a really interesting question too. So surprisingly, no. It's on my Arbiter, I've got 4 legendary pieces and 2 mythical pieces. but they aren't like quintuple rolls or anything like that. One's a triple roll actually on one of my mythical pieces, and the other is a quad roll, like where it had one red roll plus three rolls.
Right.
But so you don't see as much epic gear, I think, is the difference. Like on your speed lead, you still have 3 pieces of epic gear. That's going to be less likely when you are a spender. You're going to have most likely legendary and up for speed specifically, because you need those quad rolls potentially to get to this kind of speed. And the funny thing is, 456 is really not that fast in my
Right.
world anymore. Which
Which is crazy to
again,
me. Yeah.
it's hard to believe that's true, but it really actually is. I would say most of people's, and Arbiter is not my fastest champion, to be clear, but most of the people I face have at least one or two, if not three champions above 470, and in some cases 480 or even 490. Um, which is, I mean, I've played this game for 3.5, almost 4 years now. That is crazy to me that's the kind of speeds that we're hitting. But that's pinpoint for you, right? It completely changed the game.
It did. It did. And it's also crazy to me because when I started playing the game and I got my Arbiter, like a 300 speed Arbiter was fast,
Yeah.
and now a 400 speed Arbiter is kind of slow for endgame. Now, I don't think it's slow for Gold 5. Let's make sure we say that. Like, at Gold 5, you're totally fine at like 320, 330. You don't have to be faster than that. You don't even have to be that fast, really. But, when we're talking endgame looks different 5 years into a game than it does 18 months into.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. For Gold 5, that's a very, very, very fast Arbiter. I would imagine you rarely get outsped.
yeah,
If I were
not in
guessing.
Gold 5. In Live Arena every once in a while, but
Sure.
that's rare too. And I'm in Gold 1 Live Arena, and this is usually the fastest champion by a good 20 or 30 speed for if I get her through. She gets banned a lot. But
yeah, that makes sense.
All right, cool. Well, it's cool to know that the OG Arbiter is still there at endgame. Let's talk about some other free-to-play champions. Actually, I want to go to a login champion that a lot of people use. You see in Arena quite a bit, but he's also just great everywhere, and that is Wukong.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think Wukong, for a lot of players who started late, like last summer, last fall, he plays a major role on their account. Do you still use your Wukong, and if so, where does he operate for you?
So this is an interesting question too, because I would kill to have a Wukong on my free to play account, but funny enough, Wukong had a moment there where he was absolutely the meta in Arena. At endgame, like on an endgame spender account, you saw him all the time. He was a consistent pick, but I rarely see him now. I mean, we're talking once every like 50, maybe 100 fights. And I think really what it boils down to is he is a very bad affinity for the current meta in like endgame Arena. There are so many champions that are magic affinity that you will run into now more often. And unfortunately, Wukong is at a major disadvantage. And also for endgame spenders, there are just champions that are straight up better. Like he's still really, really, really good. Don't get me wrong. But you just don't see him nearly as much as you used to. And maybe that's a mistake, honestly, because I think I should bring him back. Because he is still so threatening. And I kind of like, in terms of build, I've always been a big fan of a damage hybrid, assuming you can get enough damage on him for endgame. I think that's where he's at his best, because there are some incredible support champs that you have access to as a spender, but he's still such a threatening damage dealer because of that A2.
Yeah, I build him in a hybrid build. I use him in Hydra, so that's why I need him in that hybrid build. But I definitely come across Wukongs who are built pure damage in Arena, and that A2 will just shut down a team and wipe them off the board, just one shot, and it's like, you spend the whole match trying to make sure he never gets a turn. You kill him, he comes back, you kill him again, you try to sleep him, you try to stun him, you do whatever you can, and then he just gets one turn at the end and you're done.
Yeah.
But so, like, when you do see him, let's say, if you did see him today, let's say in Arena somewhere, is that how he's built? Is he built pure damage, or is he functioning as that hybrid role?
The vast majority of the time he's built for damage when I see him in Arena at the current moment. Like there, 6, 7, 8 months ago when you saw him more frequently, you'd see a mix. You'd see some who build him support, some who build him damage. But I think now you see him much more damage. The biggest problem is there's so much stone skin in Arena currently, and that's the one downside to really putting him in endgame is that, yeah, he can sheep you through Stone Skin, but you really want somebody to not have Stone Skin so you can blow them apart and kill everybody else with that A2.
Right.
And that's the challenge about making him pure damage is you're not going to be able to do that. And also, unlike Armanz, for whatever reason, Armanz can, of course, ignore, UDK's passive. Sun Wukong cannot. And so that's the other aspect is there is quite a bit of countering to Sun Wukong, whereas some champions countering them is just really, really, really tough. It's not as hard with Sun Wukong.
Okay, so you mentioned two other champions we should mention. These were both free to play at some point. Armanz was a fusion. UDK was a free login reward champion. This is a while ago now, so it might not feel like UDK is really a free to play champion or Armanz isn't. But for players who like me have been around for a while, these are very much key components of a free to play account at endgame. Do these two still feature I'm assuming Armanz is everywhere, but what about UDK?
So this is actually something that's shifted too recently. So
Okay.
UDK you rarely see anymore at Endgame Arena, unless and only if you have picked someone like Rotos, where someone is specifically looking to force you into banning the UDK.
Right.
So you don't see UDK very often anymore at the end game, at least from what I have personally seen. You'll see him every once in a while, more frequently than you will Sun Wukong. Armanz is really interesting because you definitely will see quite a bit of Armanz. But even then, you won't see it as much among the top teams necessarily anymore, also because Pinpoint really can counter what he's trying to do.
Right.
And specifically the sheep aspect of it. And I actually didn't realize that Pinpoint, intercept stacks blocked sheep. I wasn't thinking about this, like they block. Obviously, I know that, but I forgot. Like, oh yeah, they're gonna block Armanz's sheep ability. They're gonna like one stack is enough to make sure that whatever champion that's being targeted by him doesn't lose or become a sheep. And I just completely didn't think about that the other day. And because I had picked Armanz and someone hadn't banned him, surprisingly, I was like, oh no, I can't sheep this guy. He's got intercept. Right. He's got Pinpoint. So right. Armanz is still definitely at the end game. You absolutely will see him a lot of time. You'll see people pick him, but in some ways, he's, I think, more threatening now for, mid game and end game non-whales than he is for the whales, because right. The people at my level have put easily 1 million, 2 million in some cases energy into that Odin dungeon. No joke. I mean, I'm probably more. Right. And so they have Pinpoint gear that is just ludicrously strong.
That brings up a good question. Let me ask you this. So, in terms of the gear now, like, do you see 4-piece Pinpoint used with 4-piece Stone Skin? Are you seeing some people moving away from Stone Skin entirely and just going in on Pinpoint? Is it a mix? Like, how are you seeing, the gear meta evolve up there?
Some changes depending on who you're facing. If we're talking about the top players in Arena, you'll definitely still see a fair amount of Stone Skin for certain builds and for certain strategies, but you'll also see people who are going full in on elite turbo speed for, 9-piece Pinpoint. So I've seen quite a bit of 9-piece Pinpoint on champions like Gizmak, on Odin. But what we're talking about, literally the absolute biggest Krakens in the game. So we're talking about people that, their credit card is melting from how right. much it's swiping right. to get, energy. So it really depends on the person you're facing at that end game arena, because there's definitely different layers. Like, you've got your top 10 to top 20 arena players, and those people typically have teams that are just going to blow you out of the water speed wise.
Right.
And so you might not see as much Stone Skin unless, maybe they're going to throw out you don't see this as often, but sometimes people will throw out Go second teams built around Galathier and having absurd resist, but it also depends on having that kind of, 1,000+ resist on a champion, which is not the easiest to do.
Right.
While still maintaining survivability. That's the big thing.
Yeah. Okay, really interesting. It's cool to kind of see life on the other end of it. Because like I said, for my account, and this isn't what I consider an end game arena account, you can see, or end game free to play account, here in Live Arena, you know, I'm working my way up through Gold 1. I believe I'll be able to get to Gold 2. I don't know how high I'll actually be able to go. It feels like if I really wanted to dedicate a lot of time and energy into this, I could probably push pretty far, but there is a ceiling. And then in terms of like, you know, tag team arena, that's another thing. I've actually, Drock, you'll appreciate this. I was in Gold 1 for 2 weeks, and then I got 4 consecutive demotions. Or I guess
wow.
5 consecutive demotions because I was just so busy I couldn't play.
Yeah.
And so what I would do, you know, is like I was putting in my one-man defenses and like trying to farm some gold bars and then forgetting to put the defenses back in time, and I got demoted all the way back to bronze 4. And I'm hoping not to make it a 5th one, so I've got defenses in now today. I got to make it back to silver.
I believe in you. You're gonna get back to where you belong.
Thanks. But okay, so that's really cool. But let's talk about some other free-to-play like key components here. I've got a few that I want to talk about. I do want to talk about a recent fusion who I use in Live Arena, I use in Classic Arena, I also use in Hydra. I use her everywhere, and that is Eostrid.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I think this is an amazing champion. It's really, really versatile. And if you were a free-to-play player and you fused this champion, you use her every day as many times as possible. Does she ever show up anywhere in your world in Kraken land?
Not in arena. You know, I don't think I've seen her in an arena team yet. I had a Hydra team built with her, actually, funny enough, because she's an underrated damage dealer, which I didn't realize until I built her, but she actually smacks, and her kid is kind of nasty for Hydra. So I did have a team that used her for a little bit. But for endgame arena kind of stuff, nah, you're not going to see her there. They're just champions that are better. And I think that's where it boils down to Stoneskin, right?
Right.
Because her kit is based around being able to place debuffs, and you've got so many people with Stoneskin or with Polymorph that it's just tricky to be able to do. Really the biggest thing for champions in late level or end game spender arena is, can they strip buffs or can they decrease buff duration? Which is why champions like Marius, who I get, he technically could be a free to play champion, right? You
technically,
free to play. Yeah. So Marius, you see all the time. Right. Basically, every battle now is going to feature a Marius in some capacity, because buffs are so powerful in this game, and getting rid of them without getting polymorphed is extremely important. But Eostrid is incredible. I completely agree. And I use her all the time on my free to play.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely, I think there are some champions like Eostrid who, she's got that arena aura. It feels like she's got a great arena kit. She does, really, if you're talking about classic arena, like gold 4, gold 5, she'll get you there. She's like Deacon on steroids, right? But yeah, once you sort of get up to the places where like everybody has all of these amazingly OP champions like Marius, now somebody who feels like Eostrid, who feels so good to a free-to-play player, all of a sudden becomes completely irrelevant because she's not specialized maybe enough. Like, she doesn't do one thing strongly enough to really take up a spot. Like, she's too spread out. She does too many different things.
Well, I think the big problem is, if you look at her kit from an end game perspective, first off, she doesn't give you a large enough turn meter fill. 15% is very small. Now 15% would be more than enough if you could land decreased speed and turn meter decrease, but you're going to face Marius. Guess what? The second you hit him with a turn meter decrease, he's nuking your entire team and potentially enfeebling you. Or alternatively, everyone's built in Stoneskin, and you're not going to land any of that unless and only if you have a buff stripper that's faster. And so that's the trick. Like, really, for end game stuff, is how many buff strippers can you build super ultra fast that would hypothetically go ahead of her for live arena potentially, and then you follow up with some nukers after. That's really the meta right now, is getting the buffs off one way or another and getting through Stoneskin without becoming a sheep.
So that's interesting, because I do have a couple of counters for Stoneskin on my account as a free-to-play, again, endgame player. But one of them I've had for a very long time. He was originally a fusion long time ago. So again, players who haven't been playing for a long time might not think of this guy as free-to-play, but I got him for free. And, I know that there are some issues here. You got to watch out for Mariska. but Nishak Verminlord is one of the ways I deal with Stone Skin team. Are bomb champions like Nishak a viable option at endgame, or is just, you know, Marishka like too much problem, or are there too many other champions that kind of nullify bombs too easily?
Definitely viable. Definitely viable.
Okay.
You will see Nishak now quite often. You won't see bomb champions as frequently as you'll see other stuff. You know, but you definitely still see them. And that's like the one thing is that you got to be careful of the Marishka because it's such a hard counter to most of the bomb champs that are out there.
Right.
Commodus maybe being the exception because he can also buff strip,
Yeah.
which makes him so good. But yeah, you definitely see bomb champs like Nishak now. I would say Nishak is probably the most popular bomb champ other than Commodus that you'll see currently in live arena. You'll see the two of them quite a decent bit. In fact, I think I faced a couple Nishaks earlier today. So bombs are in for sure. They're very viable. But again, it requires you to have amassed quite a collection of pinpoint gear because your attackers that are in pinpoint need to be basically 320 plus speed and still have ludicrous attack in order to be able to employ those kind of strategies and then still have somebody who's 450, 460, 470 speed plus as your lead and at least 2 or 3 of those champions in case one gets banned for live arena. So just it shows the massive gear requirements at the end game, right? Like if you only have 1 or 2 champions built that fast and somebody picks them, you're toast, right? You have to have some kind of backup strategy, and going second right now is very, very, very tough to do unless you have certain champions like Galathier.
So it's really interesting. We'll take another look at my Nishak build because I did rebuild him relatively recently once pinpoint gear came out. I still haven't gotten the pinpoint gear on him actually, because I couldn't find the right banner, I think, but I might have to do this later. But so looking at this, if we look at total stats again, right? So I'm running him at 269 speed. This is about 20 speed faster, and I did lose like 15 accuracy or something to get him there. 6,700 attack, which for me might be the highest attack on my account. That might be the highest number that you see.
Yeah.
You know, so the build being 4-piece stone skin and then perception gear and, you know, whatever pieces I could get to get him there. Does this make sense like for where I am, or do you feel like I would be better served getting him over into faster gear, more pinpoint gear, get him out of the stone skin? What do you think?
Well, gear level, it's tough to say because gold 1 is a very big difference from where I'm at. You know, I think the number one thing that I have seen in the last year for live arena type stuff is just speed is king. Speed is king, and if you can get a champion faster while still maintaining, you know, some level of for this case attack, it's worth doing. Like this is a tricky champion to build though, right? Because he requires massive attack, massive speed, and technically massive accuracy.
Right.
If you don't have champions like Arbaeus, which can help make it a little less gear intensive, assuming they don't get banned when you're going into arena. So I think for where you're at, that's a solid build. The biggest thing that would change between where that's at and where I'm at is, you know, in my world, he's in 6-piece pinpoint, basically guaranteed at this point, minimum, or 4-piece, maybe a 4-piece pinpoint if you can't get to 6-piece, but most likely 6-piece and up pinpoint. He's got probably 9,000, 8,500, 9,000 attack, maybe more. And yeah, over 500 accuracy, I would say for sure, if not more, like 600 plus.
Yeah.
So it's just like the stats are, they're just ludicrous. It's so weird having played Raid for such a long time and thinking about what was good and what is good now, and the gap is massive, just massive, massive, massive. So
if you had to estimate, like in terms of stat power creep, let's say in the last year, like since Mythicals came out, if you could ballpark it for like the average speed increase, maybe the average accuracy increase, and maybe the average like main stat increase, like could you even ballpark it, or is it just like bonkers?
Tough to say. I think you can ballpark speed. I honest to God, I mean, I was getting by before pinpoint with a 415 CFI, and I was totally fine most of the time. I won most of my speed battles in in live arena, provided like if I banned whatever their their Shuzen +4 or whatever +4, I was totally fine with 415 speed, and that was in a stone skin build, to be clear. So that was both stone skin and speed. So it was one turn stone skin with 415 speed. I mean, honestly, speed has gone up 50, 60 plus in the last 5 months alone. I mean,
Yeah.
the shift from when people started getting pinpoint to now is immensely drastic. And then I think for other stats, really the big change there, for better or worse, was when they changed how blessings work to try to get people to buy more soul stones, right? That was a seismic shift in how arena plays. And also, candidly, when I stopped enjoying arena as much, because it meant that you ran into polymorph on every single champion
Right.
over and over and over again. So it was like a double-edged sword. You had definitely major stat increases across the board, where people were hitting 8,500, 9,000 attack more consistently and more easily while still maintaining speed. And also 350, 370, 380% crit damage, 400% crit damage was easily achievable at that point after that. But the problem was is that you've got, in my opinion, one of the worst things they ever did in the game, the polymorph coming in, where it's just unbelievably oppressive, and you can't escape it. And the crazy thing now is, of course, like now you kind of need it a little bit because of what they've done with pinpoint. It's still bad, don't get me wrong. That's
Yeah.
a whole nother video. We all know how I hate polymorph, and I always will.
Yeah, me
But
too.
now it's unfortunately more necessary because of what they've done with pinpoint specifically. So it's, yeah, I don't know. Some weird decisions they've made in the last year and a half, 2 years, in my opinion, at least, from where it was before. If you were going to ask me, hey, Drock, would you rather roll back 3 years before Stone Skin and Polymorph and Taurus Marichka and Pinpoint? I would say, hell yes. Roll me back, man. Bring me home. But that's never going to happen.
No, and I mean, what Plarium does with all that stuff is like when they break the game, they just then find a new way to break the game to counter the way they broke it before. So it's
Oh,
like when
so true.
right? It's like it's just like no, we don't fix things, we break them further so that like
Yes.
if everything's in tatters, then maybe it doesn't matter so much. I don't know. I don't know. It's strange.
I hate that that's actually accurate, but it's
Yeah.
so accurate. Like they don't believe in my opinion, in balance, unless it's nerfing something like Hydra into the ground. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's their solution to what they call balance. But yeah, they break the game. They're just gonna find a way to break it in a different way, and then you're just kind of left with a broken trash pile. But hey, it's the game
Yeah.
we love, Colred.
It
It's
is.
the
It
game
is.
we love.
It is, and I love talking about it, and I'm enjoying the heck out of this conversation because it's really, I think one of the things about Raid is that every single Raid player has a different experience. Because your roster builds differently, your focus is different. You get different champions. There are 800 champions or something, and you build what you start with one, and you just keep collecting them, and it's like so seeing what it looks like to a spender, seeing what it looks like to somebody who's got access to that, as close to a complete roster as like it might appear to a free to play player like me. It's really cool to see that. I do want to ask about a few more champions here. We've already gone pretty long, but I do have a couple of other champions, and one of them is on the screen right now. She's one of my favorite champions in the whole game, and she's right now with the Hydra issues. Some players probably are just like not even going to try for their Mithrala anymore. But what do you think about Mithrala? Like, as first of all, just as a champion, like how good is she for you? And then do you ever still use her there at endgame?
Well. It's interesting that you ask about her because I just rebuilt her in the last week.
All right.
Because here's the thing, I can't even compete on speed anymore. For certain players. Now, a lot of players, I'm going to blow them out of the water. I'm still in the top 2% probably in speed overall. But there are a handful of players that I just can't do it. I don't have a +4 Shuzen. That's a really tricky thing. She's one of the most powerful champions in the game currently in the current meta, especially with pinpoint. And so I was trying to find a way to compete on speed with a couple different people, and I had to realize like, nah, I can't do it. I can't beat them in speed because I can't build enough champions. I can build
Right.
2 champions that are ultra fast, but I can't get 4 champions, right? And that's
Right.
what you need. You need about 4 or 5 support champions that are god tier, ludicrous 450, 460, 470 speed. I just don't have the gear to do it. So I started thinking to myself, you know, what can I do? Who can help me alleviate this? So who's not going to get locked out versus Crixias and stuff like that? Who can also cleanse? Hey, Mithrala. Mithrala
Right.
is the answer, right? So I've actually started using her again a little bit, specifically versus certain people, right? It has to be a certain person that I know kind of what they're looking to do. Because the other aspect is she is, you know, she is so good because of the cleanse, right? The
Right.
cleanse and the shield. And you don't see Narcissus, weirdly enough, you really don't see Narcissus at the high end as much as you think. It's actually a lot rarer than you'd realize. So people putting shields out is not the bad thing that it was.
Okay.
So she's a big counter when built with reaction and built with super high resistance to people like a Gizmac potentially, or hypothetically a Crixia is the big one, you know, because all these mythicals, or even a Galathier, because they ignore resistance. So she's the one champion you can actually build with enough resistance to consistently resist Galathiers and Crixias, which is really, really, really important. And again, she can cleanse that HP burn from the Gizmac, which is important as well. So yes, I have begun using her more often. Also a champ that requires really end game gear in order to get the value out of her at my level. You got to build her with at least like 1200 plus resistance while
Wow.
still maintaining massive HP and defense pools. So she's welcome to KRAKEN-land, my friend. Like, she requires absurd gear in order to make work at my level, but she's viable now. She's definitely viable.
Well, I'm just looking here real quickly, and you can see it's 728 accuracy plus the 271 resist. So what's that? 999. Once you
Yeah.
factor in her passive, it's 999 resistance, which is so crazily beyond what you would ever need for PvE. Do you know what I mean? You're doubling what you would ever need for PvE. And it's still not enough, according to what you're saying. I need another
Not
2 or 300, 300
Not,
resistance.
dude, I won't tell you my specific resistance on my Mithrala, because I actually do think she's someone I need to kind of keep under wraps a little bit whenever possible. But not that it matters. People will see it eventually, I guess. But no joke, I've got a lot of resist on her, and she is tanky too.
Yeah.
I kid you not, dude. Literally earlier today or yesterday, she got locked out by a Crixia, and I'm just like, holy hell! Like, what?
Right.
Like, how much? This Crixia, literally, I was like, this Crixia must have over what, 900 resist, 1,000 resist. I mean, what the heck? And still be fast and in pinpoint.
Right.
What? Yeah. That's the reality.
That's the exact same reaction I have whenever I use her in live arena and she gets debuffed or something. I'm like, that's crazy to me. That's crazy, because wherever you are, right? If you play enough arena, you sort of land in the ballpark where you belong based on your gear and your skill and your roster. And so, you know, when we were talking about my Arbiter before at 410 speed, she's my fastest champion on my account by a significant way. And in the place where I belong, she's probably 99.5% faster than 99.5% of the other speed champions I see. Same thing with my Mithrala. You know, she's got more resist than 99.5% of the target or the enemies would have accuracy for. So every single time she gets debuffed, I'm like, what the hell just happened? You know?
Yeah. Well, because the question I always have is, I wish we knew if it were a 3%. You know what I mean? Like, is it a 3%? But I am 1,000,000% certain in this case, it was not a 3%. Like, I did not choose the resistance aura against this person because I was reasonably confident, or I was curious, like, surely they can't lock my Mithrala out. No, I was wrong. I needed a resistance aura. I needed that extra 80 resistance potentially in order to not get locked out. And I was shocked. I could not believe it. Just thought, wow, things have changed, man. Things have changed a lot.
Well, it's good to hear that one of the key free-to-play, like, really big free-to-play champions in the game still has a place no matter where you are. And I mean, yeah, this is why I think she's so good. I've never, since I've gotten her, I've never taken her out of like major rotation. You know, for the 2.5 years or whatever that I've had her, it's like, yeah, I use her all the time everywhere. So that's good to hear. All right,
she'd fallen out of rotation hard for me. And
Okay.
to be honest, I haven't seen other people using her. It's just me so far.
Okay.
But she serves a specific niche because I'm really trying hard to build a viable Go second team, which is, I mean, shocking how hard it is to do consistently. You know what I mean? Against certain accounts. Again, you can do it against other accounts, but I'm talking the tip top. Like, you know, like I just wish I had a +4 Galathier and a +4 Nice and like there are champions you need in order to do it now. That's the one big difference. Like, don't have Nice, don't have a really strong Galathier. They're not empowered and awakened. You're really going to struggle to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, just a few more champions here. Out of curiosity, I don't believe that she's really a great PvP champion anyway. But does Lydia get spot usage at endgame?
Nah.
No.
Not for PvP. For PvE, sure, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. For PvE, she's still viable. Definitely still gets usage. You really don't see her in endgame PvP often at all. I honestly, frankly, I can't remember the last time I saw her in a PvP matchup on my main account. So PvE, yeah, she's definitely still a superstar. You still see her featured in a lot of dungeon teams and stuff like that.
Yeah, every once in a while I would see her used in PvP. Maybe not even recently, but like 6 months ago you would see it just for this revive as like a desperation play against like a Wukong or something who's going to come back and bite you. But it's like when we're talking about power creep in the game, when she was introduced to the game, she was so incredibly OP. And now you look at this passive and you're like, this blocker, I play her like this block revive doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because it's on a 7-turn cooldown. And it's just like the only place that ever works for me is in Ice Column. That's the only place that ever does anything for me is against Ice Column. So,
yep.
Okay, I do have 2 more champions, but now we're going to move on from the legendaries to the actual 2 mythicals that I have on my account. We're going to start with the not free to play. This is not a free. I just happened to get lucky and pull Mezomel Luperfang. I know that she got rebuilt. I actually saw your video on the rebuild, but that's like a showcase. You wanted to see how hard she could hit. Since she's been rebuilt, because I see her a little bit more, not a lot more, but a little bit more in arena. Do you see her more in arena? Do you think she's viable?
Yeah, so I would say she's definitely viable, but niche. I don't see her used by my opponents very often. I will use her, I think, more than most people do at my level. But for the most part, you don't see her as often as you might think, especially with a champion that goes through Stone Skin. So like the problem that I've noticed with her kit is on her first form, the only thing that matters is that A2. And unfortunately, like you have to wait for it to come back. Like, yes, you can block revive one champion and that helps. But again, the biggest problem for Mezomel is bad affinity. Bad affinity. Like, it's so frustrating because she would be an incredible nice counter if she didn't have spirit affinity. This was, I think, one of their biggest mistakes with her is making her spirit affinity. If she were force affinity or magic affinity, would be a very different story. I think you'd see her a lot more, but she's terrible versus nice, you know, versus Lazarius, versus Siegfried. All of the meta champions, for the most part, not quite all, but quite a few of them, Gizmak, Armanz, they're all the bad affinity matchup for her. So it's a real shame because her kit, that block revive, is a major threat. But if you double weak hit, you're done. You like guarantee whatever team you built is going to lose.
I will say, as a free-to-play player, if you have a mythical, if you've pulled almost any mythical, you just build them because they're so strong. They have so many more stats. I mean, that's kind of the crazy thing. Like the stat creep for these champions is huge. But then in addition, like being able to change forms and having access to basically 2 kits, it's like there's so much power here in these champions, whether it's for PvP or PvE. She is easily like the key component to my live arena team. Like when she gets banned, like I gotta find something to do because it's like, it's like, how do I get the damage out there? How do I get around Stone Skin? Do I have to use Nishak? What if they have like a fast, Siphi or something? And it's like, all right, then I'm, in trouble. So I was just curious, again, not a free-to-play champion, but just kind of interesting. But now let's go to this is, I think, the queen of all free-to-play champions right now currently is Lady Mikage. She took a hit with the recent changes in Hydro to ally attack. I don't think it matters much. Not that it doesn't matter much in Hydra, but I don't think it matters much into how we view this champion. I think she's incredibly good. And a lot of people are starting to get really close to their Mikages because of all the guaranteed champion events and the progressives on the epics and stuff like that. What do you think about Mikage? Is she viable all the way through to the end, or does she kind of max out?
Super viable in PvE for sure. I mean, some of the best teams in the game for stuff like Fire Knight use Mikage and her ally attack. Some of the fastest teams in the world. Same with Hydra. I see her in Hydra all the time, even after the nerf. Yes, she is 1,000,000% viable. So much better than I realized when she first came around. Now, interestingly enough, you don't see her in Arena as much as you did for a period there. I think there was like a moment in time where I saw a pretty decent amount of Mikages. I'll still see her, don't get me wrong. She hasn't completely disappeared, but really, like, you see champions like Arbaeus a lot more than you do Mikage when you're talking mythicals. You see Arbaeus, Lazarius all the time, Galathier, Commodus, you know, those are the kind of champions you see quite frequently. You don't see as much Mikage, and I think really what it boils down to is she's got a buff strip right, but she doesn't have control on the same ability. You know what I mean? Like, some of these champions can do both. They can strip and like, you know, not necessarily lock out, but some can. Like Crixia can strip and lock out.
Right.
Galathier can strip and put block active skills. And so for that reason and that reason alone, she's not quite in the same tier because of that stuff.
All right. That's sad. That's sad to me because
I do really good.
Yeah, I do think on her second form, this A3 is incredibly powerful for what I do in the live arena, because it's that buff strip, but it's also the increased accuracy, which, like you were saying before, pairs really well with my Nishak, which is one of the few counters I have to a team loaded with Stone Skin. But again, the issue being speed. Like, are you fast enough to get there before their Pythion or their Duchess or whoever puts up the block debuffs buff? And are you screwed there? The other thing, the really nice thing that I have found about Lady Mikage is that as long as you're not facing a UDK, this A1 is actually kind of low-key awesome.
Yes, it's incredible. Incredible. That's one of her best parts. Like, sneaky, and that's where you'll see her in Arena. Someone's built. Typically, people will build teams around her if they're using her in Arena. Like, they will build a specific nasty kind of team built around her sleep ability, built around her second form, and that's when you'll see it. You know what I mean?
All right. Well, Drock, thanks so much for your insight. This was really fascinating to me. I hope it was interesting to the viewers. Let me just ask, because I know you do have your own free-to-play account, is there a champion that maybe you rediscovered through your free-to-play experience that now you're experimenting a little with on your Kraken account? Is there anybody like that? Or are you just playing them as basically different worlds? It's like two different games for you.
It's tough because there's not a ton of overlap from what I have on my free-to-play account versus what I have on my spend account. But I would say less that my free-to-play has made me rediscover stuff, and more that just the meta shifts have opened up new opportunities for certain champions to come back into play in niche specific areas. So my free to play account has been really gratifying and very educational because it's such a different world. And this has been really fun for me too, because I'm still a very, in the scheme of things, new free to play account.
Right.
Whereas I'm looking at your account and what you can achieve, like 410 speed on my free to play. I wish, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sitting at like 323 or 330, and I'm like, wow, what a burner, what an absolute turbojet this Armanz is, you know. But that's only one champion. I can't build another champion even remotely close to that speed level yet. So it's such a different game on the free to play stuff, but it's really fun to get a chance to see kind of what you use and what's viable. And I will say the one thing that surprised me is I'm surprised I didn't see Cold Heart. Where's the Cold Heart, Cold Red? Where's the Cold Heart, baby?
There she's right there.
I use her all the time
on my
endgame account. I use her all the time. I use her all over. Like, that's the funniest thing, is that a rare champion
Yeah.
You know, and I guess she's not technically free to play, but she's more free to play than
Sure.
most Void champions would be since she's a rare. And I still use her on my endgame account all the time in multiple areas of the game. So
Just
that's
one
the
copy, or do you use multiple copies?
I use 2 copies. So she's like the real superstar for me of free to play champions that have still translated that I still use on the high end. But yeah, it's you know, I've got almost every champion in the game, or the vast majority of them, and it's really interesting to see the ones that kind of fall by the wayside and the ones that end up sticking around, right? You know, or that come back and become viable again. So yeah, great stuff.
I'm surprised Plarium hasn't nerfed her yet, you know. It's like,
dude, if they nerfed Cold Heart, people would I actually would probably quit, frankly. I'd be like, all right, that's it. I'm done. Like, you're nerfing rare champions that have been in the game for 5+ years,
right?
You know, like, that are so important for so many teams. Now I'm even out. I'll tell you right now, if they did that, I would not spend any more.
They actually did back in the day when they added the 10% cap, right? When they added like that was the her nerf.
True.
That was
when they brought new dungeons in, you know what I mean? And that's also such an interesting thing too, because there's so many champions that used to be top tier incredible, like Septimus, for example, who was a god at doing dungeons, and you were super stoked to have him, and now he's completely worthless.
Oh, don't say that. Hey, I still have love for
yeah, look, I love Septimus, but talk about a champion that needs a buff big time.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah. All right, Drock, this has been super fun. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to do a collab. We haven't done the video. We did this video first. We're going to do another video over on Drock's channel, so you should check that out. I will include a link to his channel and hopefully the video in the description below. I had a lot of fun, man. Thanks for coming on the channel.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for bringing me on, and super excited to get to chat with you, dude. And looking forward to us doing a collab now on mine. So get ready.
All right, I am ready. I am Colred. He is Drock. Thanks for hanging out. We will see you in another video on his channel shortly.